Hello and welcome to Little Britain, where we build a 00 gauge model railway in a sea can container. I'd just like to lay out some of the design principles or the wish list of this layout so that you can understand some of the choices I've made. I used to train spot in the early 1970s, but prior to that I was fascinated by steam and by trains overall. I may have started in the very late 60s, but because I would like to have both steam and diesel on my layout, that suggests the BR Green era 5, according to the Bachmann era system. I would like to model an area that I have some familiarity with, or an area of great interest to me that I visited. I did look at the North London area, Finsbury Park particularly, but for reasons of the extensiveness of the area and a few other issues, I've decided perhaps to go with a different era. I thought about Lincoln City, and that's of great interest to me as well, and it's got a lot of complexity. It's got 2 stations, 2 main rivals, Great Northern and Midland Railway, and also the Great Central operating out of it. But because the operating interest and the variety of scenery is so great, I've chosen to go with Grimsby Cleethorpes area, which gives me a pretty large town, a dock area, a seaside railway with a station right against the beach with an amusement arcade, the Great Northern Line running through Louth and Boston, which was down to a single line when I lived in Grimsby, and local trains only, and the Great Central operating from across the Pennines, and diversions through Lincolnshire. So Grimsby Cleethorpes appeals to me, and I like the idea of calling the layout Grimthorpe because it conveys an impression of that sort of 60s grimy, sooty, run-down aspect of British rail at the time. I'd like to have the ability to do continuous running, although I don't necessarily want sort of a big oval round and round. If I can disguise it, all the better, but that would be just so I can press a button and have trains running while I'm occupied building, fettling, modelling in general. I would like to model passenger and freight. As I said, I have the 2 stations at least in the layout. There were 2 other stations in the area. There was Grimsby Docks and New Clee halts, basically. The Grimsby Docks served for a variety of purposes, and there was a Grimsby Pier station at one point. That said, I can't model everything. Because we have essentially 2 railways coming into this region, one that would ultimately go west towards along the south bank of the Humber towards Goole via Barnetby, the Barnetby Junction. That could go to Lincoln, it could go up to Doncaster, it could go across to Sheffield and Leeds, it could go to Manchester, Birmingham. That was the Great Central Line. And then to the south was the Great Northern Line that ran through Louth and on to meet up with the main Great Northern Line going from Peterborough. So I can have trains direct from London, and I can have trains from the west, to and from the west, and I can have trains to and from the north via Sheffield. So a lot of potential variety, some cross-running trains. The Transpennine trains could be hauled by Midland locomotives. There'll be quite a bit of DMU running because in the early 60s DMUs replaced a lot of locals. There's the run to the Humber Ferry at New Holland, and there was also the Immingham Light Railway, which was a tram run light railway, but that may fall off the edge of the layout, maybe a step too far in terms of, you know, the amount of work to do everything. I would like to use DCC, and I'd like to use sound. I have an interesting addition to add with the sound. I would like to have surround sound to provide overall layout sound, meaning incidental noises, factory sounds, traffic sounds, schoolyard sounds, farmyard sounds, that kind of sound, and use the DCC sound fitted locos where I can afford, where appropriate, where the prototypes exist, and so on. So I didn't really mention this, but because I'm from the Eastern region, I do want X LNER and of course BR Eastern region prototypes. That allows me to run Gresley Pacifics. I mean, even Mallard graced the platforms of Cleethorpes and Grimsby at some time. You know, we're talking Brush 2s, English Electric Type 1s, which became Type 2s, Class 20s, English Electric Type 3s, which became Class 37s, the introduction of Brush 4s, which became Class 47s. Oh, and I have a call. Okay, and we're back again. I have a little map that downloaded from the internet. I'm not sure what book it's from, but it shows the approximate area of the layout that I want to build. So over here is to Cleethorpes. It's 1 mile and 40 chains that way. It curves around the steep dock curve here. There are junctions off into the docks. There's a good station in there. There's a junction off around the timber yards to the pier station, goods and passengers. So there is some history of immigrants crossing from Europe, stopping briefly at the pier, crossing right across Britain to Liverpool, and then boarding ships to the United States. Maybe some of the Titanic passengers took that route. And there's a Y here, which is nice to model. So the Great Northern Line runs up from Peterborough via Boston and Louth. Trains would come into Grimsby town, and then typically a different loco would take the train on to Cleethorpes, or if it was an excursion directly to Cleethorpes, it would ignore Grimsby and go straight around to town. Then trains from the Midlands, from Sheffield here, Doncaster, and so on, would come in and have a straight route. And additionally, there were, this is the light railway to Immingham with the trams, and trains could also continue up here to go to New Holland to take the ferry and on to Scunthorpe, which is shown here as Frodingham and Scunthorpe. And also from one of the junctions, maybe the Barnetby junction, I believe, you could go curve around south a little to go to Lincoln and other destinations on the old Great Central, the Manchester, Sheffield and Lincolnshire Railway. So there's a lot of operating variety. So on to my design for this. I have imagined a layout including the station, the beach, the sidings, and then curving round beside the docks, and there's the Y to the Grimsby town station. And of course I've flattened the Great Northern Line, the line that goes through Louth onto Peterborough and then onto London. I can have a return loop here, and I'm also incorporating a helix to go down to a low level to have a fiddle yard underneath the layout so that I can change the consists, change trains, have different trains emerge coming from London and going to London, being changed at the fiddle yard when I'm doing detailed operating. Similarly, through Grimsby town, the Great Central line will also encounter a helix, which will take it down to a lower level and a fiddle yard. So trains can be marshalled from Sheffield, from Leeds, from Manchester, from Liverpool. There was even a weekly train to the south of England, I believe it was to Plymouth or Exeter, that ran all the way to Grimthorpe. That's an interesting aside. And out from the town there's also the curve that takes you into the docks, and we can do some interesting model of the dock area. We can curve into the docks from two sides, as was prototypical, and have fish trains, timber trains, and even, if we modelled an earlier era, passenger trains through the docks. And again, on this side, the Great Central line can, instead of going down the helix, could continue, or rather after going down the helix, it can take a return loop and come back up the helix and reappear. So effectively we have a dog bone for continuous running should we choose to operate that way. And we can also have the realistic running of going off into the fiddle yard, which goes below the Grimthorpe station, for marshalling trains from the Midlands and other places on the Great Central line. So that's the plan. Essentially 2 levels of layout for the most part, in a 40-foot by roughly 8-foot container, 2 helixes, a holiday maker's station, a town station. I don't think I'll model New Clee or the Grimsby Docks station, but I might model the pier station at the end of this pier here. It depends, we'll have to wait and see on space and such complexity issues. Maybe not in the initial draft. Okay, so let me know what your thoughts are. Yes, this is ambitious. I've invested quite a bit in getting the container. I'm busy insulating it right now, so I do want to maximize the use of the space and have a really good layout that will keep me busy for a considerable time. Let me know what you think in the comments, and like and subscribe if you like this and you want to see the next installment. Definitely subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. And thank you very much.